Hello and welcome back to Antinatalism this week. I was actually going to put up a thumbnail to this video saying that ATW is back. But given my personal situation, I'm not sure how consistent I'm going to be in making these videos going forward. In fact, I'm not even sure how long I'm going to be able to continue making these videos with the situation that I am in. Anyway, that is what it is. We have some events coming up. 1st August is International Childfree Day. And then on 4th August, we have Childfree Convention. It's going to be live stream at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And the theme of the convention this time is Childfree Content Sustainable? It is going to have 3 panels. The first one is about the child-free life, about discovering that you're child-free, then about expressing your child freedom, and then finally accepting your child freedom. And the second panel is going to be about being aggressively child free, like being militantly child free. I don't know what is going to be discussed there, so I'm interested in what they say there. And then the third panel is going to be exploring whether the term child free is being weaponized by pronatalists. And this is very relevant because the situation that we are in right now, one example is JD Vance, who is the vice presidential candidate of Trump. There was a video which has surfaced of JD Vance previously from the old days where he described Kamala Harris as a childless cat lady. And not only Kamala Harris, but AOC and few others also. So, and now he has defended that. He's saying that it was sarcasm, but the substance to it, underlying to it, was significant, that these people don't have children and therefore don't have stakes in the future of the society. He is of the opinion that people who don't have children should have a lesser voice in democratic process compared to parents. So the term child free being weaponized by pronatalists is very relevant to the current situation that we are in, and therefore this topic is interesting. So they are going to discuss what can we do about it if this sort of thing is happening. So absolutely fantastic topics, and I'm looking forward to listening to the conference. Then we have Nimrod, our own Nimrod, who has already done 2 European tours, Europe AN tours, touring different cities, doing antinatalist activism. Now he is planning for German tour, Germ AN tour, if you like. And it's going to start on 2nd of August, starting in Hamburg. And he's going to go through 18 cities. I'm not going to say all those names. I'm going to pop up the list of those cities on the screen, you can see. So it starts on 2nd August in Hamburg, and then he goes through city by city on different days, and finally ends in Berlin on 18th of August. So I wish very good luck to Nimrod. I hope you spread the message as much as you can. I hope you get to talk to many different people about antinatalism. There was an author who had written under the pseudonym of Kurnig, and he had written a lot of antinatalist content in late 19th, early 20th century. He, in fact, has been described by some antinatalist philosophers like Karim Akirma as being one of the first proper antinatalists. Karim Akirma had described earlier antinatalists than this period as proto-antinatalists, whereas Kurnig was the first, in his opinion, what we can call as proper modern day antinatalist. Now, this is not a new news. The news is that Lenny has worked hard to put up a wiki page of Kurnig, and that has been accepted. So we now have a proper wiki page describing Kurnig's works. Thanks to Lenny for doing this. Some new numbers were released about people having children in the United States, or people not having children in the United States, on PweResearch.org. As you can see on the screen, these are very interesting numbers. A growing share of adults under 50 say that they are unlikely to have kids. And you can see here, those people who were unlikely to have kids who were under 50, in 2018 were 37%, that grew to 44% in 2021, and now it's almost 50-50. In 2023, 47% of adults under 50 say they are unlikely to have kids. So consequentially speaking, it is a good news from an antinatalist point of view. But I think the devil is always in the details. So let's have a look at the next page of these numbers. So what are the reasons that these people say that they are unlikely to have kids? A majority of them, especially the young ones, as you can see here by the gold bars, who are under in the range of 18 to 49, for 57% of them say that they just don't want to have kids. No reasons given. And I agree with this. The justification should be given by those who want to have children rather than the other way around. Slightly less number of people above 50 have this kind of attitude that they just don't want to have children. Now, this could be antinatalist reasons, or this could be some other reasons. There is no way to know from this. Then there are other reasons as well. So some people want to focus on other things, which I don't think would be antinatalist reasons. Concerns about the state of the world, which could or could not be antinatalist reasons. Somebody might be concerned that their child would suffer in the kind of the world they would be brought into. So we don't know to what extent these are antinatalist reasons. Could not afford to raise a child. Again, yes or no, meaning in their own financial condition, they might be thinking that the child would suffer and therefore would not bring the child. Or it's just that they want more money, which is not an antinatalist reason. So could be or could not be antinatalist reasons. Concerns about the environment. Again, they might be concerned that the child would suffer in this climate change and environmental problems. Or they might be concerned that the child would be adding the carbon footprint of the world to the carbon footprint of already existing, increasing carbon footprint of humans and so on, would be contributing to the damage of environment, which is sort of a misanthropic argument. So could be or could not be categorized as antinatalist reasons. Didn't find the right partner, not antinatalism. They don't really like children, definitely not antinatalism. Has nothing to do with liking, hating, disliking children. Negative experiences in their own family growing up, which may or may not be antinatalist reasons. They might have some condition which could be inherited by the child and they don't want to pass it on to that child. Or it could be just that they have gone through such an experience that they don't have an interest in having child. So yes and no. Infertility, definitely not antinatalist. A spouse or a partner who doesn't want, so their reason then is not antinatalist reason. And then finally, it never happened for people above 50. So you can see the reasons why people are not having children vary, and we have no way to know whether they're actually antinatalism or even ethical antinatalism. I would guess that a very small percentage of these people are not having children for ethical antinatalist reasons. Majority of them would not. That is just my guess. It is not clear from these statistics. Let's go further. There are some interesting statistics here. So people who say they are unlikely to have children, what are their reasons? Who say they don't want to have children, their reasons. And here it is clear, antinatalism is not on the table. It is like having time for hobbies and interests, affording to things, the things that they want, saving for the future for their own self, not for the child, being successful in their job and career, not antinatalist, having a social life. So no antinatalist reasons here. Next one, we have what about the worries that people face about their own future? So people who don't have children worry about not having enough money, which is like 35%. Some people also worry who's going to take care of them in the old age. People also worry that they would be lonely when they are old. And then finally, having someone who will carry on their values and traditions when they're gone. Now, I think the first three categories, some antinatalists would be there. It is completely valid that being an antinatalist and still worrying that about who's going to take care of themselves in their old age, whether they would have enough money for their retirement and so on. These are valid worries even if you are an antinatalist. I would think the last reason, who's going to carry forward your values and traditions, would be of least concern to antinatalists, especially if you are one who is aware of the futility of this existence, of this sentient existence. But yeah, that's about the people themselves who are existing. And then finally, the last part is quite interesting. This is gender based. So green bars are men, gold are women. And here you see 64% of the women think they just don't want to have children. This is people under 50, by the way. They just don't want to have children. They don't want to provide any justification. And they should not be required to provide any justification, honestly, because by not having children, they are not harming those children. it is the other way around, that people who are having children should be required to provide a justification for having children. Anyway, so more women than men just don't want to have children, which is the summary of this statistics. So overall, interesting statistics, interesting infographics, but again, we don't know to what extent it is antinatalism. Lawrence made a video responding to the interview of Elon Musk by Jordan Peterson, which was published recently, and they were talking about antinatalism. And Lawrence really did a very good job in responding to different arguments and misunderstandings and fallacies which Elon Musk and Jordan Peterson used. Now, I want to respond to that, not because I disagree with anything that Lawrence has said, but just that I want to make a top up as some kind of addition, some clarifications on top of what Lawrence has said.
There was a recent research article published on this too. Antinatalists are much more likely to show dark tetrad traits: Machiavellian, psychopathic, narcissistic, and sadistic, because those first three weren't enough, right? And so those things are tightly aligned, especially the best predictor was psychopathy for being an antinatalist.
Sure.
Right. Well, and the psychopaths are very, very, very self-centered, right? They're like overgrown 2-year-olds, overgrown aggressive 2-year-olds.
If you look at the arguments for antinatalism, then you would be surprised to hear that antinatalists are psychopaths as self-centered. Maybe where this is coming from is people who don't have children for their own reasons, people like child-free people who don't want to have children. And I don't think they can be called psychopaths either. I mean, their reasons for not having children could be said to be self-centered, and I don't think there is anything wrong in that, and there isn't anything wrong in loving your own life and wanting to do what you want to do. So that also is misplaced. But antinatalism itself is completely opposite to being self-centered. The reasons of ethical antinatalists for opposing procreation or not having kids is 100% altruistic. It concerns about the suffering of the child who is going to be brought into existence and the suffering that child is going to cause to others once she is brought into existence. In fact, if you see some of the placards of Stop Having Kids outreaches, you would see they are asking people to take care of existing people rather than creating new people. Most antinatalists would agree that adopting is better than creating a new child. So where this argument for antinatalists being psychopaths and self-centered comes from, only Jordan Peterson knows, and it is completely fallacious.
So I'm going to pop up on screen now the study that Jordan, I believe, is talking about. The study actually doesn't mention sadistic or sadism at all, so I'm not sure where Jordan got that from. But to address the point that Jordan is making about some antinatalists having unsavory characteristics or personality traits, I have no doubt certain antinatalists will have unsavory personality traits. In fact, one of the reasons that people are antinatalist is because we know that some of the people that we create will go on to have unsavory personality traits, and if we don't want those around, then the only sure way to avoid that is not to create people in the first place.
I think there's a little clarification required here. What Lawrence is saying is that if there are 100 people and the 2% chance or 2% of the people would have develop those unsavory traits, then just to avoid their existence, we should deny existence to the rest of the 98% of the people who are healthy mentally and physically and don't have those unsavory traits, which sounds a little bit unfair to those 98% of the people. I think the main argument here, and this is probably even Lawrence probably was meaning to say, is that when you're thinking of having a child on an individual level, there is always a certain risk of that new child developing certain unsavory traits, causing suffering to that child itself as well as to others. That is sort of a risk argument which is on the individual level and not on a social level in terms of percentage of people, is what I think is a stronger argument for antinatalism.
One of the fundamental ethical problems is different than a scientific problem. One of the fundamental ethical problems that's plaguing the West is this catastrophically low birth rate. And you know, when you start making public pronouncements...
Observing the numbers, I mean, I noticed this 20 plus years ago, that the trend in birth rates for really all countries past a certain level of economic development was trending to well below replacement, if not already below replacement. And if you extrapolate the curve, which one always has to be cautious about extrapolating any demographic curve, But if so I always preface by saying, if these trends continue, most countries will dwindle into insignificance.
So I've been thinking about that in relationship to sacred images.
Okay.
Okay, well, the sacred image of masculinity in the West is a crucifixion, but a man who's crucified. But the sacred image of a woman isn't a woman. The sacred image of a woman is a woman and an infant, right? It's a dyad and not a monad.
Sure.
Right. And in the Christian view, those two images, they vie for supremacy, right? I mean, obviously, Christ is the superordinate image, but Mary as the mother of God is the female equivalent. And so one of the things I've been playing with at an axiomatic level is the notion that unless the feminine is conceptualized as the combination of female and infant, then the culture has lost its attachment to the traditional sacred images and is probably on its way out.
This is just saying in fancy words that women have a responsibility to have children. This is pronatalism. This is forcing women to have children and nothing else. And this is having certain rules. Men should do certain things. Women should do certain things. Otherwise, your culture is lost, and that's bad. This is fear-mongering. I think this needs to be called out, this kind of misogyny which exists in pronatalism.
I think there's an argument that when a culture loses its religion, that it starts to become antinatalist and decline in numbers and potentially disappear.
Lawrence addresses this point quite nicely by pointing out that practically in the real world there has never been a case where a culture lost its religion and then became antinatalist as a result and then disappeared as a result. That he does nicely. But what I want to say is that the presumption behind this argument is disappearance of this sort is bad, and that assumption is what I want to question. If a culture or a group of people or entire humanity disappears, goes extinct because of non-reproduction, through non-reproduction, it might be regrettable, but would it be more regrettable than a continued existence for billions of years? And from an antinatalist point of view, it would be a lesser bad thing to do. This is quite evident in Better Never to Have Been in David Benatar also. And it logically makes sense. Why would the disappearance be bad compared to a continuous existence for billions of years of sentient beings who suffer through the process? The rest of the points Lawrence has made very nicely. Kane Baker has made a video about the accusation that antinatalism, if widely accepted, is going to cause a lot of harm to women, and therefore antinatalism is sexist. What I'm going to do is I'm going to summarize what he has said in the video. It's a very nice video. And then along with sexism, he also made some arguments for racism, but he did not respond to those arguments. So I'm going to try and respond to the arguments for racism. So first, let's have a look at the sexism part, which is the focus of Kane's video. So the arguments he has presented in the video, he refers to Christine Overall, who has actually made these arguments as per Kane. And the arguments go like this, that if antinatalism is accepted widely in our society, then women would be the victims. It would cause a lot of harm to women. How it would cause a lot of harm? So women are the people who get pregnant. There is a person who grows inside them. They have to pay a lot of bodily costs. And therefore, if antinatalism is accepted widely, then it would be women who would be blamed for procreation. They would become blameworthy. Of course, we're talking about moral blame here. So that is the first argument, that women would be blamed for procreation if antinatalism is accepted. The second argument is that in misogynistic societies, generally women don't have a status, they don't have a stand. Whatever status they have, it is because of the children they have. Usually the more number of children they have, the more standing they have in the society. And if we expect these women also not to have children, we would be causing more harm to them. Their situation would become even worse than what it is today in those misogynistic societies. These are the arguments. There is also a third argument that whether a woman can have a certain right or not is now dependent on external condition. The condition being whether arguments like asymmetry, Benatar's asymmetry, are true or not. Depending on that, we would be giving rights to women to reproduce. So if the asymmetry is true, that means that women ought not to have children. They don't have a right to reproduce. Whereas if the asymmetry is false, and if we discover that we have a duty to have children, then also it is imposing certain right on women that they ought to have children. There is no consideration for bodily autonomy of women in this, and therefore this externalization of the condition of procreation actually is harming the rights of women. These are the general arguments, and Kane very nicely responds to all of these three arguments. One, he says that the gendered nature of procreation means that pregnant women would be subject to a moral blame. Of course, by antinatalism, it also says that you ought not to get pregnant, but if you do, you ought to get abortion. Not all antinatalists are of this view, but in generally, antinatalism says that you ought to have abortion. Now, the gendered nature itself is to blame here, and not the arguments for antinatalism. That's point number one. The second point, in case of misogynistic societies, which would treat women even worse than how they are treating if they don't have children, the problem again is somewhere else. It is not in antinatalism, but rather it is in the misogyny of those societies. And we have seen, as societies become, women in those societies become more educated, as the religiosity decreases, misogyny decreases, and then women start to take their own decisions. So it's a misogyny in those misogynistic societies which is a problem, and not the antinatalism itself. The part of external pregnancies, and I think he refers to this at the end of this video slightly indirectly, but I want to emphasize this a little more, that yes, the gendered nature of women get pregnant, and they are at the center of all of these things unfairly, because it takes two people to get pregnant really. But if you externalize this, so imagine that in future it is possible to have fertilization and also incubate the fetus and embryo outside of the womb in a machine. If that is possible, then the whole argument of bodily autonomy goes away, but the argument for antinatalism remains. That means that the problem is not with the argument of antinatalism. It is the way we have a process of procreation here. That's one. The second part is that antinatalism also prevents a lot of harm. So antinatalism is going to prevent existence of a lot of people who would be subject to harm in turn. And that would include men as well as women. So we have to compare the harm that antinatalism is causing to the harm that antinatalism is preventing. And if the harm prevented by antinatalism in some way outweighs or is more morally significant to the harm that it is causing, then we ought to accept antinatalism. This is the argument put forth by Kane. And finally, he also talks about the truth of antinatalism, that whether antinatalism is widely accepted or not, the consequences of that are independent of the truth of antinatalism. The arguments for antinatalism are the evidence for truth of antinatalism. They remain as they are, irrespective of whether antinatalism is accepted, whether how people perceive it, how they interpret it, and so on. So these are in general responses to the argument that antinatalism is sexist and will cause harm to women. And the whole video is absolutely fantastic. I listened to that 2 times on normal speed because he really made a very nice video analyzing all these arguments. Now, on the way, he also mentions that antinatalism, in parallel to the accusation of sexism, can also be said to be promoting or racism, or to be racist in and of itself. So the argument is that people in underprivileged countries, people in poorer countries, they don't have the luxury to not have children. People in first world maybe have pension schemes, they have government and state to take care of them in their older age, but people in underprivileged countries might not have that luxury and they have to care for themselves. Therefore, they have to have somebody who can take care of them. So it is sort of unfair to expect them not to have children given the situation that they are in. That's first argument. And the second argument is that the attitudes of people in general towards the people in high fertility rate countries would be racist if antinatalism is accepted widely. Now, Kane just presents these arguments. He does not actually provide any response to these, but I am going to do that analogously to what Kane has said for sexism. So first of all, on the surface, it might look that people in poorer countries are on their own. There is no state or government to take care of them, so they have to have children so that somebody can take care of them in their older age. And then it is unfair to say that they should not have children. So if antinatalism is applied or accepted widely, it would be unfair on them, and it would be discriminatory on people who are in poorer countries. And I am experiencing this firsthand myself. I am on my own. My retirement plan is what I do. In fact, I'm even penalized for my retirement, because whatever small investments I have, whatever gains I get from those investments, they keep on getting taxed as and when I get the gains, as and when I materialize those gains. So I am, let alone being helped, I'm penalized, I'm taxed for my investments, even if I am retired. I'm not retired right now, but if I do retire and if I get those gains, I would still be taxed. And there is no state help, there is no government help in my retirement. I don't get any pensions, nothing. So I am experiencing this firsthand. I am on my own, living in India. But this sort of inequality and the consequence of that and the relationship to that for antinatalism is actually only on the surface. It is very superficial, because even in the first world, even in the richer countries where state provides the care, state provides the pensions and blah blah blah, they can do it only for certain individuals as long as rest of the people keep on producing workers to manage these systems, to keep on running these systems. So if antinatalism is accepted widely, then even in the richer countries, this is going to be a problem. Now, you can argue that yes, everybody is going to suffer if antinatalism is accepted widely, but the degree of suffering in the first world is going to be lesser than the degree of suffering in the poorer countries. And that is true, but that is not just true for antinatalism, it is true in general. And again, the reason lies elsewhere. It lies in the fundamental inequality in terms of wealth and everything else that we have in the world between different countries. So the point to blame is that inequality and not antinatalism. Therefore, this argument really does not cut through that antinatalism is discriminatory or racist. The second argument is the attitude towards the people from high fertility countries. Now, in general, overall, all of the countries in the world except some sub-Saharan African countries, they have fertility rates which are going down. A lot of countries are below replacement level or maybe at replacement level. Even in countries like India, where I am, a lot of states are actually below replacement level. Only some states are above replacement level. So overall, the country's fertility rate is around about replacement level. The point is, except few regions in the world like sub-Saharan Africa or certain states in India where fertility rate is high, everywhere else fertility rate is dropping. It is well below replacement level. As a consequence of this, people who who are in those high fertility rate countries would be looked upon with hatred, with dislike by the rest of the world. And we can talk about behavior on an ethnic group level. So Kane acknowledges that certain behaviors, when we talk that certain ethnic group has certain behavior, that does not necessarily in and of itself would mean that it is racist. We can explain these phenomena without having to resort to racist explanations. But Kane says that not everybody is capable of these nuances. There are a lot of idiots and bigots in the world who would actually use this fact to cause discrimination and hatred towards the people in high fertility societies. Now, that is true. But again, here, the blame lies somewhere else. It is the attitudes of those racist people to use this fact that high fertility regions have high fertility rates. They're just using it to make their point. They could use something else. So the problem is their bigotry, their stupidity in the first place, and not antinatalism. So the argument really is that racists are going to be racist, irrespective of whether antinatalism is accepted widely or not. And again, like sexism, I would say, irrespective of the consequences of when antinatalism is accepted widely, the arguments for antinatalism are based on the um, uh, or are the evidence for the truth of antinatalism, which is independent of all of these consequences. So these are the arguments for racism. Overall, I loved the video. Thank you, Kane, for doing this. Third episode of Julio Cabrera's criticism of Benatar's argument for antinatalism was released. And this time, unlike the previous two episodes, the criticism or the way of criticism was slightly different. The first two episodes focused mainly on the style of writing, the style of philosophy of Benatar, and the way Benatar has been responding to his critiques. This episode focused mainly on the arguments for antinatalism, so it's a little more interesting in my opinion. Cabrera criticized Benatar's on multiple different points, and will briefly go through those points. One is that Benatar has assumed, as per Cabrera, that the potential being who is going to be born but not yet born has a potential interest of not being born into this world of suffering. And Cabrera says that how does Benatar know that this is the only interest that potential being has? What is to say that that potential being might have an interest in being born despite all the suffering in the world? In fact, if we consider the values and the nature of the humans that exist today who are happy to be born despite all the suffering in the world, and if we take the same set and apply to the potential being to construct the potential interests of that being, then we can very well say that that potential being has an interest in being born despite all the suffering in the world. That is the first point Cabrera is criticizing Benatar on. The second point involves a fallacy of equivocation. First, we need to understand what that fallacy is, and then we'll go to what Cabrera is saying. So, fallacy of equivocation is to use an ambiguous term and apply it in different ways to suit your needs. So, for example, if I say that cats are very good pets and tigers are big cats, therefore tigers are very good pets. Now, this is not true. Tigers are not very good pets. They would actually attack humans. In normal case, I'm saying wild tigers. So how did we come to this conclusion? Well, in the first sentence, when I say cats are very good pets, what I meant was the specific breeds or species of cats who are small, who cannot eat humans. That's what I meant by the term cat there. When I say tigers are big cats, it's a different type of cats, which I was not referring to in my previous statement. That is the ambiguity in the term cat, which is exploited here to reach the conclusion that tigers are very good pets. Another example could be that all men are equal. Women are not men, therefore women are not equal. Now, when I say all men are equal, the term men here refers to all human beings. But when I say women are not men, the term men here refers to the male human beings. That ambiguity is wrongly exploited to say that women are not equal. This is fallacy of equivocation. Now, in case of Benatar, as per Cabrera, the term which is ambiguous and its ambiguity is exploited by Benatar is the term non-existent being. The non-existent being, the term can be referred to in two different senses. In one sense, we can say that the being who does not exist yet, but they will come into existence. So these are potential beings, and therefore we can construct potential interests for those potential beings. This is counterfactual conception of the non-existent being. This is one sense. The another sense is non-existent being. There is nobody who exists. That's it. That is the empty conception of non-existent being. In case of empty conception, Cabrera says it does not make any sense to talk about their potential interests, and therefore it does not make any sense to talk about something being either good, not good, bad, not bad for them. They just don't exist. That's it. There is nothing. That's the empty conception. And Cabrera's claim is that Benatar is using these two senses of the term non-existent being to come to this asymmetry which Benatar is proposing. So let's now have a look at the premises of Benatar's asymmetry. The first premise is presence of pain is bad for those who exist. Presence of pleasure is good for those who exist. The third premise is absence of pain is good even if there is nobody who is there to enjoy those benefits of those goods. And the fourth one is absence of pleasure is not bad unless there exists somebody who is deprived of those pleasures. Cabrera has problem with this point number 3 and point number 4. He says that in case of 3, when we say that absence of pain is good, we are using the counterfactual case, counterfactual conception of the non-existent being. So we are applying potential interest to that potential being, and we are saying that absence of pain is good for them even though they don't exist, but we are thinking them as potential beings having potential interests. But when we go to the fourth point, when we say that absence of pleasure are not bad unless there exists somebody, there at that time we are using the empty conception of non-existent being. And this is the fallacy of equivocation. Cabrera says that if we consistently use only one sense of non-existent being, then these premises fall apart and the asymmetry also falls apart. So for example, if we say that absence of pain is good, even though these potential beings don't yet exist, but it's good for those potential beings, then we can also say that absence of pleasure is bad for those potential beings, because had they come into existence, they would have been deprived of those pleasures. That is on the counterfactual case. In case of empty conception, he says that we cannot say something is good or bad. So absence of pain is neither good nor bad, is neither good nor not good also. Similarly, absence of pleasure is neither bad nor not bad also. We cannot say nothing good, nothing is good, nothing is bad, good or bad. Therefore, there is no asymmetry in case of empty conception as well. So if we use this consistent sense of that being who is non-existent, then these premises fall apart. Therefore, correspondingly, the asymmetry also falls apart. Now, Benatar has already clarified that his asymmetry is not a logical asymmetry. He has said logically you can construct these cases in formal arguments. His argument is axiological. He says my asymmetry is valid in axiological case, and therefore it is called axiological asymmetry. Now, what is axiological asymmetry? Cabrera clarifies here a little bit. In his interpretation, axiology, by the way, axiology in general means that the study of value, the things that we value in this material world. So for example, this is the spanner, it is made of iron. I have some value for this spanner based on its utility and the cost for preparing and so on. But imagine instead of this, there was a spanner made of gold. I would be valuing that spanner differently. This value is something I am deriving. Ultimately, these are just two different elements in periodic table with different physical and chemical properties. But I assign some values to these different materials, iron and gold, depending on my value sets and depending on my intuitions. That is axiology. And Benatar's asymmetry and the premises behind those asymmetries are based on the things that we value, the value that we hold. And therefore, it is axiological asymmetry and therefore it is valid. That is Benatar's claim. Now, Cabrera says that even on the axiological part, the asymmetry does not hold, because if we consider the counterfactual case of a potential being, they would have a similar set of values that the existing humans have. And then they would also have, we can also say that things like, absence of pleasure is bad for them because they would have been deprived of those pleasures had they come into existence. Also, they would have an interest in being born despite the suffering, and therefore if we don't bring them into existence, we are causing harm to them, on the contrary to what Benatar is saying. Therefore, even on axiological grounds, Cabrera says that Benatar's asymmetry does not hold up. Now, there is another part to this, that Benatar has claimed that his asymmetry, the axiological asymmetry, provides explanation for 4 other widely accepted intuitive asymmetries. And many a times people who have criticized Benatar have been responded by Benatar in the way that Benatar has said that, okay, if you don't accept my axiological asymmetry, then try and provide an explanation for these 4 asymmetries as an alternative theory. And if you can't, then my axiological asymmetry has that explanatory power and therefore it is valuable. Cabrera says that I'm not going to play by that game. I'm not going to accept the challenge of explaining these four asymmetries in the first place. I am rejecting these four asymmetries. And the way he does that is in two ways. One is, again, using consistently either the counterfactual case of potential beings or an empty conception of non-existent beings. If we use them, then some of the asymmetries fall apart, and he says that those asymmetries are not there in the first place. Secondly, he sort of does not accept that these asymmetries are intuitive and widely accepted. So, for example, there is an asymmetry which says that it is strange to have a child for the child's sake, whereas it is not strange to not have a child to avoid suffering of that child. Now, the word strange, first of all, it is subjective and it depends on your intuitions. And Cabrera says that these are not widely accepted intuitions. People, in fact, have children thinking of the benefits that those children would have in their lives. And therefore, they are having children for the sake of those children, according to their intuitions. So these intuitions are not strange. And therefore, these asymmetries don't exist at all. So in this way, these four asymmetries, Cabrera says, they don't exist at all. There is nothing to explain. So therefore, this axiological asymmetry is not explaining anything. These are general criticisms of Cabrera. Now, Cabrera also says that the main difference between Cabrera's arguments and Benatar's arguments is that Benatar focuses more on the harms to the being who is brought into existence, whereas Cabrera focuses more on the manipulation of the being who is going to be brought into existence. And Cabrera acknowledges that the manipulation argument also is susceptible to this counterfactual case. So, for example, we could say that this potential being who has potential interests could have an interest in being born despite knowing that they would be manipulated in their life by their parents. And Cabrera provides an answer, or at least tries to provide an answer, of which I was not convinced. He says that, okay, that is one way to look at it. There are so many different ways to look at both antinatalism and pronatalism, and nothing is absolute. Antinatalist argument is not an absolute argument. That is what the answer Cabrera gives, which I was not actually entirely convinced with. But anyway, these are the criticisms of Cabrera of Benatar. Now, I want to clarify here that I have just said what Cabrera is saying. I am not going to provide where I agree, where I disagree with Cabrera. I'm not going to provide my criticism of Cabrera's criticism of Benatar, for the simple reason that I don't feel qualified enough to do that. Although I have my own opinions, I am not convinced personally by Cabrera's criticism. That much I will say. Now, this was the third episode. There is a fourth episode scheduled on 31st of July, in which they are going to talk about more of the material world argument. The argument that the quality of life, the optimism bias, the chapter 3 of Better Never to Have Been. This episode, the axiological asymmetry, is chapter 2 of Better Never to Have Been. So the next episode, which is on 31st of July, is going to be talking more about chapter 4, the quality of life argument of Benatar. So we'll see. Looking forward to what Cabrera says in that episode.